He also talked about the need for Germany to pay its fair share of NATO, which Germany took strong issue with once she got back home. But do you notice she didn't hop the plane to Mar-a-Lago? It was only the Freedom Caucus members and Ted Cruz, but she didn't get to hit the beach with Donald Trump down in Mar-a-Lago. That would have been no burkini jokes. You guys are horrible people. And Angela Merkel in a what? Burkini? Forget it. That's crazy. Pat Buchanan's got to save me from this crew I work with. Pat, how are you? Syndicated columnist. I mean, you could picture Angela Merkel in a burkini, right? Pat. I mean, that would be quite a sight.
It would be quite a sight on the beach. That's right.
So we got so much to talk about.
Down there in Palm Beach.
Oh my goodness, we have so much to talk about. We'll talk about the Merkel meeting, what's in store this week. But I have to ask you first, Pat, about the stories coming out of the White House, and my sources telling me that the Bush moderates and Democrats like Gary Cohn, then Dina Powell, who's a Bush loyalist, another Goldman Sachs person, that each of them is seeing their influence rising against the populists, which I think are fairly small in number. So you almost, it's like the Democrats versus the Republicans, or the Democrats versus the conservatives in there.
Well, these White Houses have battles, ideological and political battles inside over issues because both parties are divided. But what astonished me was how much of it was there in the press. And what did they have? 17 people they had interviewed, they said, for that story. But it doesn't surprise me at all, and it looked like it's the Goldman Sachs folks in White House versus the Bannon-Miller opposition. But I was surprised at how candid it was, how open it was, and people commenting on each other and who's up, who's down, and Reince Priebus is now moving toward the Bannon camp.
the enemy of my enemy.
World War I or something.
Oh, yeah. Pat, it's the enemy of my enemy is suddenly my friend. So it's like, wait a second.
I think the political folks would want definitely. My view has always been that while Ryan and those folks disagree with Trump on the populist agenda, they have a conservative agenda also on which both sides agree. So I think that would eventually move Reince, who I think is basically sort of a Capitol Hill Republican, basically into the camp working together with the populists. You're going to need both agendas to win this thing.
Well, here's what I'm concerned about. And I promised, and Bannon asked us at that CPEC thing he did, that keep us in check. Make sure to keep us honest. And I took him at his word when he said that. So my concern here, Pat, is the issues that flipped all of those old Rust Belt states and all those blue states red were the issues that you have been talking about for decades. I've been talking about for at least 15 years, which is trade, immigration, economic nationalism, and a more judicious and pragmatic foreign policy. And yet I see in key positions at the Treasury Department and some even in the Justice Department, we have Bush loyalists in these positions. And
I agree with you to this extent. You look at the makeup and the composition of the cabinet and the rest of it, I don't deny these are able folks. But if the agenda is going to be implemented, it's going to rely more and more heavily on Donald Trump himself, who presumably understands what got him here and believes these things. I mean, take the trade issue. I mean, it's quite simple. You're going to need some kind of border adjustment tax or tariff of 10, 20% when goods coming in. You cut taxes on American corporations that are here in the United States. I mean, this is the way to restore the balance, get rid of the trade deficits. The president knows this. I think the other folks know this, and you got to rely on him to do it. But I will say, look, if he decides to go with the old Goldman Sachs route, the globalists, then the game is over, and then all the effort is in vain. But I'm basically betting on Donald Trump himself.
Yeah, it's up to him. I mean, you can't be enamored of someone just because they made $250 million when they sold their Goldman stock, especially after he spent so much of the campaign and the primary season blasting the sweetheart deals that Goldman got and the influence that the corporatists had on U.S. policy over the years. I mean, that's going to not work for him.
Go back to NAFTA in 1994. that was fundamentally not only a trade deal with Mexico, which Mexico then devalued, it was a bailout of Goldman Sachs, which was up to its ears in Mexican debt. And so all these folks, I mean, they are interested in the globe. They are the Davos people. And they're much more familiar with Davos than they are Des Moines or Dubuque. And these are the folks that really cost the Republican Party and cost the country and denuded it of its manufacturing. But I think Trump, and he has people in there who are not only the political types, but the other types, economic types, who are economic nationalists. And that battle is underway. But I will say, if Trump abandons that, things are going to continue the way they are, and you're not going to restore American manufacturing.
Right, and I think, again, that's the end of Trump. I mean, that's the end of economic nationalism, populism, all of it.
Well, see, that would be fatal, I think, for the Trump presidency, but these issues are going to come back again and again because they came up from the people. They came up from what's happening in the country. And I don't think the American people or the folks who voted for him are going to go away. I mean, just like in Europe, I mean, you see the right-wing groups are falling short, but the centrist parties are all moving to the right because the issues are driving and pulling them that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks said, well, Geert Wilders didn't win in the Netherlands, so the populist movement is over. But these things take a long time to really show effect, as Reagan understood in 1964, how long it took.
Reagan, exactly. The country wasn't ready for, Ronald let the bloodbath begin Reagan in 1966. But by the time you got to 1980, the whole country, after Nixon's 49 state landslide, the whole country had moved further and further toward the right, and the McGovernites and the others who had taken over the Democratic Party were basically out of it. Carter recognized that by trying to move to the right, and that's how he won the election. He carried 10 out of 11 southern states. But take a look at the government in Holland. That government's been moved to the right on immigration. The prime minister was talking tough on it. A number of the other parties there have been taking up the issues. Even the French centrist party was taking up this issue. Fillon was, before he got in all the trouble. So these things are taking more and more time, but there's no doubt which way the trend is going.
On foreign policy in the administration, ABC's foreign correspondent Terry Moran had this comment. This was after the Merkel visit to the United States. Let's listen.
It's like Yik Yak, that high school, social media app where people say, well, I heard somebody said something about him, about her, and they're lost in the weeds of this adolescence out of Washington, so that the primary feeling is not, we don't like the president's agenda, he's president of the American people. We can't deal with this guy.
Having lived through a White House where people said George W. Bush makes the world doesn't respect the United States under George W. Bush, and the Republicans said it under Obama. People of the opposite party always say that.
So the commentariat set and the reportorial class want to continue to portray Donald Trump as not just a disruptor, but a buffoon, and that all the smart set in Europe is laughing and ridiculing him. And I guess by extension, that makes us all, a bunch of dupes. And that's what you're hearing consistently from the press.
Well, you are hearing that, but I will say, look, I was astonished at almost the exact number of the German contribution to defense. I think it's 1.3% or something like that of GDP, which is preposterous. That's the largest, most powerful country in Europe. I mean, its traditions are not wholly Pacific. And it really ought to be doing a lot more. And I think the American people, you take a look at the budget cuts and things like that, they are going to ask more and more, what are these folks doing to contribute to the common defense, and why are we fighting all their wars, and why are all our guys up on the DMZ in South Korea? And questions like that, and, why are we in the Balkans, and John McCain wants to...
Oh, God, that's the one I want to ask you about.
Yeah, we're all Montenegrins now, huh?
Pat, when he went after Rand Paul last week and said Rand Paul is basically colluding with the Russians because Rand Paul doesn't think we should go into Montenegro or expand NATO or Lithuania, whatever the topic is. I mean, John McCain is just not happy unless we're deploying like 50,000 troops somewhere.
I know. I mean, he wants to bring Montenegro, which has got a real, it's got a real political problems. The prime minister quit. He said they were trying to assassinate him. It's 600,000 people, the population of D.C., and he wants to. I mean, how does it strengthen the United States of America and make us more defensible by bringing them in and declaring we're going to go to war to defend Montenegro? What Rand Paul said, hey, let's take a look at all these war guarantees we're handing out. And when I saw McCain say that, that he's working for Vladimir Putin, I said that solves one problem, what I'm going to write on tomorrow.
Well, this is the debate that has been playing out, Pat, for decades and decades and decades. We keep having the same argument, and now we're increasing the defense budget by $54 billion. $4
billion, and how much are the Germans increasing it? I heard they're going to increase theirs by $3 billion. 3
strudels.
This is, again, when you run into more and more trouble, people, and they are, you take a look at that budget, there's some blood on the floor there, and people are going to say, why are we cutting all these programs when we're defending, the Koreans and the Japanese and the Germans and the Estonians and all the rest of them, and we're going into ever new wars in the Middle East with all the troop deployments increasing over there. Something's got to give, and I think it's going to be the American empire.
No, I got to stand up for Korea. I think Korea is the one place where we absolutely need our troops, and we need to remember that the Korean War was we won the peace in the Korean War. We won it. But this everyone I'm talking to in the administration, North Korea is a real problem for us.
They're bad actors, but I will say, if they need 150,000 more troops up on the border, shouldn't they be Korean troops? Korea's got an economy 40 times as large as North Korea, twice the population. It's got access to the superior weapons of the United States, F-15s, F-16s, U.S. tanks, far superior to anything there. And my view has always been, the United States allied with them, you can use American air and naval power offshore rather than have Americans the first to die in the Second Korean War, because I'll tell you, I don't believe a war is going to break out. I hope not. But I can't believe the American people would support the sending of more American troops to fight that war on the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah, well, China would be happy if we pulled out of the region. And they're building 3 more islands, I guess, in the South China Sea. And apparently we can't do anything about it.
Well, the reason they're building that is because they had $4 trillion in reserves thanks to the MFN for China and all those China trade deals.
Mm-hmm.
They piled up enormous
huge wealth
surpluses every year.
Huge.
And now they're very wealthy, and they've got all this extra money.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're doing what countries do that build up like that, is expanding.
Hey, Pat, before we let you go on the health care bill, the vote is coming up on Thursday. Everyone I trust on this tells me that, and my own analysis, that this is not the best deal for conservatives and competitiveness in the healthcare marketplace. But they need a win, and now it's just like we've got to win this. Could this come back to bite the Trump administration in 2020 if we start seeing healthcare premiums and increase and choices actually decrease because that phase 3 is mythical, as Tom Cotton said?
Well, big time. Even if it gets through the House, I wonder if it's going to get through the Senate. Again, we can go back to Rand Paul. But look, if you throw if a lot of people have come to depend on health insurance and it is suddenly taken away from them, and others are seeing problems attended to the new bill as there were to the old, you could have a real problem before 2020.
Oh, my God. Well, God bless. Pat Buchanan, you should know this, that they recovered Tom Brady's jersey, both 2 jerseys from Super Bowl 51.
And stole them, huh?
Yeah, and it looks like the Mexicans took them. So we're still getting ripped off by the Mexicans. So it looks like a Mexican journalist.
Across the border. They took it across the border.
Yeah, so the Mexican journalist took the jerseys. Unbelievable. Pat, thank you so much. Great to talk to you as always on the Laura Ingraham Show.